All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to get things started. Welcome to the 2022 Great Valley High School Prospective College Athlete Information Night. This program is designed to provide some basic information for families of students from the ages of 8th grade through 11th grade. You know, if you have a child in your house considering playing a sport in college. My name is Mike Seymour. I'm Athletic Director at Great Valley High School, and I'll be the host tonight. And we have two presenters. Our first presenter will be Jeff Martin, who is a Great Valley High School counselor. He's also our NCAA liaison, and he's the head football coach. And we also have a presenter, Jim Van Blanc, who is a senior associate director of undergraduate admissions at Temple University. So there'll be two people that will be important for us tonight. Tonight's program will be broken down into three parts. The first part will be where Jeff Martin goes through some of the basic information about the NCAA clearinghouses and what things Great Valley families should keep in mind as they navigate the preparation process to be eligible to compete at the college level. Second part will be where Jim Van Blanc describes the process from the college admissions point of view. And the third part is when we will attempt to answer any questions that you put in the chat feature. If you haven't checked out the chat feature yet already, Jim has offered his Temple email. If there are questions that come up along the way that we don't answer tonight or you think of after the fact, please feel free to reach out to either Jeff or myself, but Jim has that available for you as well. Our hope is that the program will last about 45 minutes. If we're not able to answer your questions or do not have the answer, we'll make sure we get that information back to you. We are recording this Zoom, and I will eventually post it on the Great Valley Athletics YouTube page. And if you want to go back and rewatch it, or if you know somebody that missed it tonight, they'll be able to do that. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Martin. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Mike. So like Mike said, I'm going to go through the clearinghouse, talk to you a little bit about what it takes to be eligible to participate on the academic end with the clearinghouse. And then I'm going to hand it over to Jim, and he's going to talk to you more about from the college's end, how they handle things. So the first slide I have up here, I think this is a good place to start. When your son or daughter is setting goals, this breaks down by sport the chances of participating in college athletics at the Division I, Division II, and Division III level. Regardless of what level it is, playing college athletics is difficult. Even at the Division III level, there's a recruiting process. So if your son or daughter is able to play college athletics at any level, it's certainly an awesome opportunity. So the next slide, you're going to see you have resources that are available to you throughout the process. And you're going to, maybe talk to people or see it on the internet, options to, pay for recruiting services. And there's different things that you can do to help your son or daughter to prepare them. A lot of the resources that your son or daughter can use are really free, to be honest with you. Number one, your high school coach, it should be a great resource in the process because one thing is they know the player and they can give a perspective on what level they think they can play. College coaches are also resources through the process because they will start communicating with your son or daughter sometimes in their junior year or earlier to help them along with the process. And then your school counselor and your teachers in your school are also good resources as well, helping the students to find the right fit in college that they want to attend. One thing to consider if you're going to put the money into the process and some of the things that you can pay for that I think are beneficial. Sometimes students will do tutoring with the SAT or the ACT, depending on what sport that they play, extra training outside the sport, whether that's speed and agility training or specific training depending on that sport. So the counselor's role through the process is going to help the student to identify the right courses that they need to take to make sure that they're eligible. They're also going to help them with the admissions process to make sure that they're doing their research to find the right college and or university that they will be applying to. And at Great Valley, the counselors will meet with your son or daughter at least one time every school year. And we also hold evening presentations on a yearly basis that are specific to 9th, 10th, and 11th and 12th grade. The coaches are going to be the ones who are going to communicate with you again about, you know, what you can do from an athletic standpoint to meet your goals, what things you can do to improve on a yearly basis, and keep them focused on that. The counselors at the high school will also help with the NCAA eligibility requirements and making sure that they're fulfilling that process and they're ready to go when it's time to graduate. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Eligibility Center. Sometimes some people still refer to it as the NCAA Clearinghouse. Years ago, they changed the name. It's now referred to as the Eligibility Center. I will tell you it is a great resource. So if you go to their website, there's pages of resources and links that you can look up about recruiting, about when coaches can talk to you, when coaches can't talk to you. They'll walk you through step by step what you should be doing in each grade while you're in high school so that you feel well prepared throughout the process. So the main purpose for the Eligibility Center is that they have to make sure that all Division I and Division II prospective athletes meet the requirements to be certified. So the first part is the academic certification. And that means essentially is that the student has taken the proper number of core classes required for the NCAA Eligibility Center and that they've earned a minimum GPA, SAT, or ACT score. The amateurism certification, which they also look at, is going to be, making sure that they remain in amateur status and that they haven't taken any money prior to participating in college sports. So when we talk about a core class, Great Valley, this is a snapshot of the high school portal where you can see on the NCAA website, you can look up each high school. So what you'll see here is 392363. That's our CEEB code. If you plug that in to this page, what that will do is that will pull up Great Valley's list of approved courses. So that is something that I update on an annual basis, and it will list all the courses that you can take that are core classes and recognized for the NCAA Eligibility Center. And they're in your core disciplines, so math, science, English, social studies, and also world language. So to be eligible to participate in Division I and Division II sports, you have to take 16 core classes. And later in the presentation, I'll talk to you a little bit about the breakdown of those 16 core classes. There's also completing those core classes that there's time limitations. So, and they're different between divisions. So Division I, you have to complete all 16 core classes within your 4 years from the time that you graduate. All right. You don't have any extended time beyond that. And you have 8 semesters to complete those 16 core classes. And that means that you have to do it within that 4 years, and that it has to be on time. Okay. Division II does have a little bit of flexibility. You still do have to complete the 16 core classes, but they will allow you to take a couple courses post-graduation, but you must complete those courses before you participate in that sport in college. Division III, actually, there are no NCAA core class requirements. Division III when you apply to a Division III school, you have to meet the standards of just the college or university. You do not have to meet the minimum standards for the clearinghouse. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go step by step, go over basically what you should be doing in each year and highlight those things that students should be focusing on. So in grade 9, it's all about planning. All right. The biggest thing is when the counselors meet with the students to start on the right foot, really focus in on taking the right courses and earning the best grades that they possibly can. And that also pertains to athletics. All right. The first thing that any college coach is going to do when they speak to your son or daughter's coach, or they speak to them in person, is they're going to ask them for their GPA and most likely their transcript. All right. And that GPA, the grade point average, is your cumulative GPA, which 9th grade is included as well. So again, you want to start off on the right foot. Making sure that you're taking the right core classes in 9th grade is also important. All right. In 10th grade, you actually can begin the process of registering for the NCAA Eligibility Center. You can wait till your junior year, but if you want to, you can start in 10th grade. And this is going to be where you start your profile page and your initial certification account. All right. Again, it's a good resource to get used to. If you know that your son or daughter is definitely going to pursue college athletics, I would definitely advise you to look at the Eligibility Center website and to register in 10th grade. In grade 11, this is probably where you do most of your work as far as registering with the NCAA. So at the conclusion of 6 semesters, so at the end of your son or daughter's junior year, your son or daughter is going to request their transcript to be sent to the Eligibility Center. And that's going to be the initial certification where the NCAA is going to look at the transcript, make sure that they're taking the right courses. And that's when, once you're registered with the NCAA Eligibility Center, that also will allow you to be to take your son or daughter to take official visits at Division I and Division II schools. You can't do official visits until you've done that initial registration with the NCAA Eligibility Center. So you're going to request for your transcript to be sent at the end of the junior year. You're also going to arrange for your SATs and ACTs and SATs to be sent to the Eligibility Center. And you're going to ensure, again, that you're taking the right core classes. I want to take a step back for a second. There's one distinction I want to talk to you a little bit about between the Eligibility Center and the actual college and university standards. With the Eligibility Center, you have to just meet the minimum requirements, okay? So if there's a 2.3 GPA and a 1,000 SAT, as long as you meet that minimum, you meet the requirements of the Eligibility Center. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get accepted to the college or university. You still have to apply to the college or university. And in many cases, the college or university standards are going to be a little bit higher. So I want to make that distinction. In 12th grade, you're going to do your final certification. So at the conclusion of your son or daughter's senior year, your final transcript from high school is going to be sent to the NCAA. And at that time, they're going to make sure that you've had those 16 core classes completed and that you have that minimum SAT and SAT or ACT and that minimum GPA to be eligible, okay? This is also where they're going to do the final amateurism certification, make sure you meet those requirements. And if you meet all of those requirements, then you are eligible to participate in Division I and II sports. And one of the reasons that the NCAA Eligibility Center looks at Division I and Division II is because they are at that level, your son or daughter could be eligible for athletic scholarship. All right. Division III, there's actually no athletic scholarships. All right. So if you hear that out, in conversation, it is not true. So I just want to make sure that you understand that. Now, I will tell you at Division III, sometimes, you can get merit-based scholarship. So that doesn't mean that you're going to pay that full tuition always, but I want to make sure that I explain that. All right, so how is the GPA calculated at the Eligibility Center? It is calculated differently than what you'll see on your son and daughter's report card or transcript. They are looking just at that letter grade. So whether it's an A+, an A, or an A-, it all equals 4, okay? They don't take into account the pluses and minuses, all right? So essentially, they'll take those 16 core classes, whatever your quality points are for each one of those courses, you're going to add them up and divide by 16, and that's going to give you your son or daughter's core Eligibility Center GPA. And that's just going to be your math, science, English, social studies, and world language. It's not going to include any electives or phys ed or health. All right, so I'm going to break down the requirements between Division I and Division II. So for Division I, as you can see from the screen, as I've mentioned, there's 16 core classes, but they tell you, they break it down by discipline, how many years of each core you have to take. So as you can see, 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 years of science, 1 year of an additional course, 2 years social science, and then 4 years of additional courses. All right. On the right-hand side, what you'll see is to determine eligibility, what they do is they work on a sliding scale. So the lowest GPA to be a qualifier is going to be a 2.3, and that you'll see that the minimum SAT required with that 2.3 GPA is a 980 SAT, all right? And as your GPA increases, the lower the SAT that's required. You'll also see in the bottom right-hand corner on the right-hand side, the academic red shirt. That's a category that they introduced a few years ago. Essentially, what that means is even if you didn't meet that 2.3, but you're above a 2.0 and have that SAT that aligns with that GPA, you actually are eligible to participate as an academic red shirt, meaning that in the first year, you can't compete, but you can practice with the team and you can receive scholarship for that year. All right, and I talked about that. So there's 3 outcomes that could come from that final certification that's done by the NCAA. You're a full qualifier, meaning when you step foot on campus, you're eligible to participate and compete and receive scholarship. If you're an academic red shirt, you can't compete in your first year, but you can practice and receive a scholarship. And then there's a non-qualifier, meaning you did not meet the standards for it to be a qualifier or an academic red shirt, and therefore you cannot compete in college. All right, Division II. Not a huge difference, but it does have, again, 16 core classes. One of the differences, if you notice from the last slide, there's 4 years of English required in that core GPA for Division I, but only 3 for Division II. All right. And then you can see from the screen all the breakdowns of the core subjects that you need to take. All right. And then you'll see on the right-hand side, their sliding scale. It is a little bit different. So the minimum GPA, core GPA to be able to participate is a 2.0 and receive scholarship at the Division II level. So you can see that that scale is a little bit different. You can also be a partial qualifier at the Division II level, meaning, again, you don't have all the academic requirements necessarily, and that you can practice in your first year, but you cannot compete in your first year. As I mentioned before, Division III is not governed by the Eligibility Center to get that core GPA. You have to meet the standards of whatever that college or university is. And again, most of the time, the standards are going to be higher at the college level than it is going to be for the NCAA Eligibility Center. All right, now I'm going to just quickly jump to the recruiting process and switch my hat to coach's role and talk to you a little bit about that. All right. So as recruiting goes, it really is different depending on the sport. Usually what I use an example is some sports like track and field or swimming, for example. You really just have to have that time, and the college coach knows right away. They can look in the newspaper and see what you ran or what you swam, and if you're meeting those times to be able to be recruited. Whereas in a sport like football, it's a little bit more involved. You could be a really good player, but you physically, they want to see how you're going to develop and you're going to be able to compete at the college level. So they have to physically see you, all right, as opposed to the sports that are time-based. They don't necessarily have to see you physically to determine that you can participate at the college level. I did talk a little bit about official visits versus non-official visits, all right? So official visits are visits that are when you're recruitable, the college coach is going to invite you for an official visit. And what that means is the college or university can pay for your meals, sometimes for your lodging when you come to that college or university. All right. That's really when they know they're seriously looking at you. And they probably have already offered you a verbal commitment in some cases. All right, but you're going to go to campus and they're going to do the tour and do all those things and also give you some money as part of the process for lodging and for eating. Okay, non-official visits are ones that you're not getting any money for. You can go at any time. You can start as early as ninth grade if you want to. I think most students will start visiting colleges or universities starting in 10th and 11th grade. But there's no governing of those official visits. Official visits, you can only go on, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 5.
Yeah, that's right. 5 official visits.
Okay, so when you're deciding on what schools that you want to go visit, if you're offered those official visits, you can only choose to do 5 of those. It's going to be really important for your son or daughter to make sure that they prep for the visits. Make sure that then when they go to the university and they do their tours, that they've looked into it, they know what they have to offer, and be prepared to ask good questions and communicate with the coaches while they're there. That first impression is really important for the college coach as well. They are investing in you as a student athlete, and they want to make sure that they're making the right decision. And their job, to be honest with you, is to bring in the best student athletes that they can depend on for 4 years. So make sure that you take the time and put the effort into preparing for that visit and potentially an interview. In some cases, you might do an interview with an admissions counselor when you go there. All right. Social media with recruiting is huge. All right. Like, for example, for football, like Twitter is huge. The students they'll put their highlights up there. College coaches will follow them. And a lot of sports, that's where college coaches might see you for the first time. There's everything technology wise is right there for the student athlete. Where they can be their best self-promoter for the sport that they want to participate in, and make sure that they're getting good information out to those colleges so that, that information is out there about your son or daughter. And I would tell you the one piece of advice that I would give you is at this time, like when they're young, is to, the quantity is really important. Come up with several different colleges and universities and put it out there at all different levels. The worst that can happen is that a college coach doesn't respond. But if you do put that information out there and you get your son or daughter on their radar early, that's really what begins the process. And I do want to mention, the importance, as much as it can be very positive for your son or daughter, the social media piece, the importance of making good decisions, making sure that your account, you're posting good stuff on there that's positive and not negative. Because if you put something on that's negative, it's just as easy for them to take them off their radar on their end. Okay. So your social media presence, at least in, today's world of recruiting, is very important. For some sports, going to camps and clinics is really important in the recruiting process. Like some sports, such as, like, I'll say baseball or softball, they have these clinics that you go to, and there's, maybe 20, 30 coaches there at the same time, where they're watching your son or daughter perform, is very important. All right. And that's depending on the sport, and for example, for football, you go to camps in the summer. Similarly, they might have, 15, 20 coaches there that your son or daughter can get in front of, and they can see them perform. So you're, again, getting them on their radar. Every college or university on their athletics website has an athletic questionnaire for prospective athletes. That's the first step, all right, that I would tell you to do for your son and daughter, is to fill out that questionnaire. Again, mentioning the importance of quality or quantity. You can maybe choose 30 schools if you wanted to, and fill out those questionnaires. And again, the worst thing that's going to happen is they're not going to respond. The best thing that's going to happen is you're going to get on their radar and potentially open those lines of communications. And it's usually basic information. It's your GPA, what sport do you play, what position do you want to play, your contact, your high school coach's contact, potentially your height and weight, whatever your best times are, things like that. So again, if you're starting the process, I would start as early as sophomore year, filling out those questionnaires, because in some sports, the recruiting process does begin as early as sophomore year. There are rules that the NCAA has for when coaches can speak directly to athletes, all right? But there are no rules for students reaching out to college coaches. So you can email, you can call the athletic department. They just can't, and the college coaches just can't initiate the contact. All right. So that's a really important thing to understand. And again, get the word out, start to build those connection with the college coaches. And if they respond, make sure, this sounds very basic, make sure that you urge with your son or daughter to make sure that they respond to the college coaches, that they open those lines of communications, and that they're having good conversation with these coaches beginning at an early stage. So at this point, I have one last slide. As I mentioned to you, the Eligibility Center has some great resources. We did highlight a few of the resources on this slide, excuse me, of some of the resources. They do have a Twitter account, an Instagram account. They have some brochures that you can fill out. I would recommend that you go to the site to look at some of these resources that they offer. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Jim. As Mike said, he handles things on the college's end, and we've been lucky enough to have Jim help us for years. And before Jim started with helping with the athletic piece, he used to come to many of our evening presentations to help talk about the admissions panel. So he's a great resource. So thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jeff. And thanks for having me again. I'm always honored to be here and spend some time with Great Valley students and parents. I feel like Jeff did all the heavy lifting on this one, so I'm just going to go through a little bit about the admissions process from our end as it relates to prospective student athletes. I do have some things that I'll kind of follow up on that Jeff mentioned, and just to make sure that you understand the significance of it, and then we'll take your questions, as Mike said earlier. So first of all, the admissions process itself can't be any different for prospective student athletes than it is for any normal student. And not to say that athletes aren't normal, but the process is exactly the same. So I think it starts with, and Jeff mentioned this earlier, it starts with what schools do you think would be a good fit for you? In a lot of your cases, athletics is going to play a role in that, but it's other things as well. For example, at Temple, we're a large public research one urban institution. If you're not comfortable in the city, then we're probably not a good fit. So there are things that you have to really do. I think this whole process, both on the athletic side and on the admission side, really starts with a really good self-evaluation from the students and parents as well. So with regard to the admission process, I work with all of our coaches, and all of our coaches, as Jeff mentioned, when they're talking to me about students that they are interested in, it all starts with that high school transcript. And so they'll ask me to pre-evaluate certain students, students that they're particularly interested in. And I'll give them a pre-read, as we call it, and let them know, hey, this student is likely to be admitted, if they applied, or the student is not likely to be admitted. And then it's up to the coach to kind of take that information and go back and decide, what's important and what isn't, and whether or not they'll continue that process. But in most cases, it's going to be the students who really have to take the lead on this. So, for example, do your research about institutions, about schools that you're interested in applying to, and find out what the process is. For many schools, that's applying via the common application. So get out there and kind of see where that fits with you. Figure out what the deadlines are. Are you going to apply early? Are you going to apply just regular decision? So prospective student athletes need to meet all of those same deadlines and still need to complete an application and go through the process. What usually works best at schools is when everybody kind of stays in their own lane. What I mean by that is I, as an admissions person, don't want coaches telling you that you're admitted. And coaches don't want me giving out their scholarship dollars. So I stay in my lane, and I review students academically and make sure that we're doing everything that we have to do to meet our end of the NCAA guidelines, and the coaches make sure that they're doing what they need to do. But again, the process itself is exactly the same. I had a student and her mom and dad in our office today, and unfortunately, she's not going to be considered for a merit scholarship because she hadn't met our completion date for of March 1st, just because she never looked on the portal. And even though we reached out many times about what we needed to complete an application, she didn't do it because she sent everything to the coach and thought the coach was going to do everything for her. And that's not how it works. You still need to, send to the admissions office all your official transcripts. Yes, most likely coaches will ask for an official transcript so they can send it to me so that I can pre-evaluate you. But in the end, you're still going to have to complete and meet all of those deadlines, just like any other student athlete would be. Jeff mentioned it earlier. I was going to jump in and he beat me to it, but just because you meet the NCAA eligibility standards doesn't mean that you meet the admission standards for that particular school or university. So again, lots of research on your part. Be aggressive. It's okay to reach out to admissions folks and ask questions if you don't know the answer. Use the resources that Jeff mentioned that you have, especially at Great Valley. One of the things that makes it super easy for me to come here and do presentations and is the relationship that we have. I know that if the counselors at Great Valley have a question about a student that's applied to Temple, they'll pick up the phone or email me and reach out. And if I have a question about something that I may not understand on a Great Valley transcript, I'll reach out as well. So that relationship is really important, and you should use that to your advantage. I also come at this from a parent standpoint. I had twin daughters who 5 years ago now went through the process, and it's really hard. This is specifically to the parents. It's really hard to hear from a coach that your son or daughter isn't good enough to play for them. It's really hard. Trust me, I've been through it. And my kids, were runners. So it was times and all of those things. And it's just really hard to hear that. But you have to understand that the college coaches are the ones that determine whether or not your son or daughter will fit into their program. And you will differ 99% of the time, but it's their program and they're going to make those decisions. So again, that self-evaluation part of that has to be, at what level do you expect to compete at the Division I, Division II, or Division III level in college? What makes the most sense for you? What will make that school be the best fit for you? And don't be fooled. Just because a school is a Division II school doesn't mean it's not competitive, and doesn't mean that you won't have a terrific experience. I mean, I used Haverford College here locally with their running program. Haverford College is Division III and could beat most Division I teams in the country. So don't be fooled by that Division I, Division II, Division III. Division I is a huge commitment. Your time is accounted for from the time you wake up in the morning until you go to bed at night, and then you wake up the next day and do it all over again. So you really have to understand that commitment and make sure that that's something that you're willing to do or that you're comfortable with. The other thing that I want to talk about is, coaches love great students. So when you're reaching out to coaches, make sure that that lead paragraph should be just a brief introduction, but that next paragraph should really be about your academic background. Lead with that and then talk about your athletic accomplishments. Because coaches are looking for really, really good students that they're not going to have to worry about for 4 years. They know that you're going to be a good student at their institution. And then the other piece of it is, there's two ways to get merit awards, at Division I and Division II programs. One, as was mentioned earlier, is athletic aid. But the other is is academic money as well as athletic. So if a coach can recruit a student athlete that is a really, really good student, and the admissions office is going to give them $10,000, that's less money they have to come up with on their end, but at the same time it's benefiting the family because you're benefiting from both sides. So those things are really, really important. Jeff mentioned it really a while back now in the presentation, but ninth grade counts. Get off on a good foot if you're in that age group. It's really, really important, because me as an admissions person, I'm going to look at your overall academic record. So I'm going to look at ninth grade, I'm going to look at 10th grade, I'm going to look at 11th grade, I'm going to look at the courses you chose to take. So did you challenge yourself academically? I'm going to look to see how well you did. I'm going to look at what other things you did. I'm going to read your essay. All of those things are important in our process. And whether you're a prospective student athlete or you're just applying without that athletic piece, those things are all really, really important in the process. So again, most really good schools from an athletic and admission standpoint have a really good relationship, and we do at Temple. I work primarily with our compliance office. So the nice thing is that no coach can call me directly, which is really nice. I work specifically with the compliance office, and the compliance office works with the athletic department. So any coach can ask for a pre-evaluation anytime they want from me, and I'll give it to them. And then what we do is I also code applications once student athletes actually apply, so that athletics can run a report and know who's applied and who hasn't. So the earlier that you can do things, the better off you are. Again, it's impressive to coaches when you meet all those deadlines and they don't have to keep bugging you about it, right? So that's super, super important, and they're things that you kind of need to think about as you go through the process. All right.
That's great. Thank you, Jim.
I will stop there.
Yeah. What I'd like to do, if anybody has an interest that's listening, if you have any specific questions for Jim or for Jeff or for me for that matter, if you want to put them in the chat, you can. If you look in the chat, Jim did also provide his email address, and Jeff and I can both be reached at school if you have any questions. But if anybody has any questions about anything you heard tonight or anything that we didn't cover, if you want to put it in there, we can take a look at it. guess you guys nailed it all. It certainly was pretty comprehensive. All right. Well, what I will do here is one of the quick question. I don't know if you're looking at it, but how does the certificate of amateurism work with the new NIL rules? So for those of you who don't know what the NILs is where college athletes are getting paid, they're being sponsored and can have money.
Yeah, so the NIL is National Letter of Intent.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the you were asking about the amateurism certification. So they will make sure when you create that account through the Eligibility Center that you've done that initial process, done your initial amateurism, and you can't sign your National Letter of Intent until that has been completed. So that is your pre-certification. So you can sign a National Letter of Intent to the school, meaning that you've met all the requirements of the Eligibility Center prior to that signing date, but your final certification is not done until after you sign that letter of intent, which is at the conclusion of your senior year when you submit your final transcript. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, the next one is a great question with some of the schools now not requiring SATs. The clearinghouse is going to continue. Either of you guys have any sense of that?
Right now, the NCAA, the Eligibility Center, is not requiring test scores.
Okay.
At least for this cycle, right, Jeff? I don't know what we don't know what they'll do for the current juniors or sophomores, but for the time being, there is no. So they're only using the minimum GPA.
Correct. Yeah, and what we're advising students is similar to what we're advising students from the academic standpoint. So current juniors, even some schools haven't really made a decision. Some schools are waiting to see what happens. We're advising students to take the SAT or ACT because I would imagine that at some point they will reinstitute that requirement.
Yeah. Each school is really different that way. What I will say is because I know in the last couple of years where schools did away with SAT or ACT requirements and testing, sometimes parents and students don't really believe us that we really don't care if you send in your test scores or not. I mean, I can speak specifically for Temple. We've been test optional since 2015, and we're not going back to ever requiring the SAT or ACT. And we really, this sounds bad, but we really don't care if you send us a test score or you don't.
Okay.
So.
One of the other questions there, I don't know if you see it, assuming we're worried about grades or classes, that they aren't worried about that. What are the benefits of registering early, for instance, being a sophomore?
When you say registering, I'm assuming you're speaking about registering with the Eligibility Center. What are the benefits? Just so you get more communication and that you're more in tune with the things that are going on within the world of the NCAA Eligibility Center. And to be honest with you, from year to year, there are sometimes changes. So you're keeping up to date, and they're also giving you reminders on things that you should be doing. So there isn't necessarily a huge benefit other than the fact that you have direct access to those resources earlier. In some cases, there's, depending on the sport, you can actually sometimes be verbally committed earlier in the process. And therefore that would mean that you would have to register with the Eligibility Center. And in some cases, they actually will do an early review before those 6 semesters have been completed. And in that case, you would have to be registered with the Eligibility Center. And you're going to know if your son or daughter is in that kind of unique stage where they're being looked at earlier in high school because they're a highly recruited athlete.
If I'm not mistaken, our compliance office and collegiate compliance offices have access to the Eligibility Center. So they can pull transcripts and things from the Eligibility Center. So it's always a good, I mean, Jeff's exactly right. There's no huge advantage. I just like the fact that it's done. It's one of those check boxes you checked off that it's finished, and now you can think about and worry about other things.
Okay, we're about 45 minutes in. I'll stay on here if anybody has any other questions or wants to throw a question out there. Certainly feel free to give me a call tomorrow at school or an email, and we'll get those answers for you. I want to, in particular, thank Jim for giving up his evening, and Jeff for being, so comprehensive in his explanation of all this stuff. So thank you for everybody coming tonight, and I guess that's it.